Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan, your host. Today, we have the honor of having with us Dr. Karen Wyatt, who has a lot of experience, especially in more recent years, with end of life and hospice work, which is dear to my heart. My undergraduate degree was in gerontology. It turned out that I ended up being a campus minister and working with young people rather than older people, but now I am one of the older people, and so I'm around when I'm around people my age. A lot of us have dealt with the illnesses and deaths, people we love, and that's right in your wheelhouse. So, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I started out my medical career as a family practice doctor, so taking care of people of all ages and doing births and following the little babies as they grew up. But fairly early on in my medical career, my father died by suicide, which was totally devastating for me, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Grief, and it just threw me off course in certain ways, probably in a good way. Ultimately, that was meant to happen, and I struggled so much with my grief over his death that I finally ended up volunteering for hospice because I realized, like, I don't know anything about death. I don't know anything about grief. I never learned any of that in medical training, and I knew that there was just I needed help, and I became a hospice volunteer so I could just be with people who were dealing with death and grief, and that changed everything for me.
Mm. Imagine being a family practice doctor, you probably didn't have a lot of free time to begin with. Did you have to sort of cram volunteerism in there?
Yeah, I was a mom. I had two little babies, 4 months and 2 years old, but had my practice a halftime practice, and then just, yeah, added the hospice alongside. But it didn't take long for me to realize that was the work I was really meant to do,
Right.
and that was where I was thriving, was in working in hospice. So I ended up giving up my family practice and just doing hospice for a number of years. It changed everything. It changed how I live spiritually, really, as I sat with people who were dying and heard them talk about what was important to them when they looked back at life from the very end of it. And I realized, wow, these people have a wisdom that you can't necessarily acquire when you're young and healthy and you haven't been through a challenge
Mhm.
like that. So I decided I want to learn from my patients what it is they think matters and what they are turning their attention to. So it helped me change how I live and learn to be more in the present moment, to
Mm.
live with more love and joy and forgiveness in my life. So I'm so grateful for that work. And ultimately, I went on to write books and then do a podcast. And I'm now retired from clinical practice. I don't see patients anymore. So it ended up shifting everything for me in probably the direction I was meant to go all along. So
I'm glad that happened for you. I've been in my career has been in campus ministry for most of my life. I'm on the campus of the University of Arizona where we just had graduation. So it's uncannily quiet now. The parking lots are empty. It's just as quiet as can be after a really tumultuous, last couple of weeks. But I've worked with so many students who were in college but didn't know why. And they know that they need to make up their mind about something, and maybe they already have, and they've started careers that they really don't like.
yeah, yeah, so true. We have to make all these big important decisions for life when we're young and we don't have experience. So we fumble our way through that. And
I was at Stanford for 7 years, and Stanford is a majority grad student school. It has more grads and doctoral candidates as it does undergrads. Not very many places are like that. But I met so many who were so far along in their PhDs and couldn't stand their topic. I would just help them finish what they were doing and try to develop some other avocation. What feeds you that might be the other thing that you do besides just this niche that you've devoted so much time to?
yeah, that's so interesting. For me, when I went to medical school, like I kind of had this revelation earlier in my life that love is what life is really about and what we're
Yes.
here for, and that love is the force that can heal people. I went to medical school with that belief and I got shot down immediately and found out, our Western medical system can't accommodate a viewpoint like that.
Mm.
doesn't do very well when we try to bring like this higher perspective into medicine. It's just all about rational science. And so that's why I didn't feel very happy practicing traditional medicine. But when I got to hospice, it's like, oh, this is a place where I can bring all the love I have in my heart here, and it's welcome and needed, and it fits in this world.
Would you say that you were among the first generation of women to populate the medical schools, or was there a generation before you?
There was a generation before, but it really, by the time I got in the 70s, like there were a third of my class were women. So there were women who came before who really paved the way. That was actually at the time, that was a large number of women to have one third of the class be women. Now it's over 50% in
Yeah.
it.
When you still were practicing, do you think the number of women entering the field changed any of those ways of doing things? Did it still stay as unwelcome to a message of love?
It's hard for me to gauge for sure if that's changed, but I fear not. I fear that we've moved even further toward technology
Mm,
and the rational practice. And still, when I go and speak to groups of doctors, I still don't feel very welcome if I talk about the idea of love. You know, like
yeah.
like I had a doctor say, "What do you mean that love has a healing power?" And I said, like if you don't understand that and can't comprehend it, it's probably because you haven't experienced it or felt it. You
Yeah.
haven't seen that when we approach our patients with compassion and love, like we're we're enhancing their immune system function, and we're helping their own healing processes and supporting that and supporting who they are. But so I don't know if it's improved or not.
Mm. I've been a Catholic priest for almost 38 years now, and one of the questions that I would ask my students frequently is, have you ever been loved at church?
Hmm.
Because you can be a very practicing religious person with all kind of exterior stuff and be busy about doing that. But sometimes people would look at me like I had two heads, and I'll say, well, let me rephrase the question. Have you been loved at church? Well, of course, I didn't rephrase it at all. I just repeated it. uh, but many times they hadn't. And I said, well, let's start there. I'm a pastor. I can introduce you around. I can help you get networked. It makes a lot of difference when you're in a community of love. And my experience of hospice is that, off the charts.
Exactly, exactly. That's the place for me where I felt welcome and like, this is the kind of medicine I had in mind that I wanted to practice all along. And so it was a good fit for me.
Hmm. So what are you doing now? Or you started as a hospice volunteer? Are you still around hospice work on a monthly basis, or?
Now that I've left clinical medicine, I mostly focus on writing, and I do a podcast. I'm a grandmother now,
Ah,
and my husband's retired, and we travel back and forth to visit our kids all the time and see grandkids. So my podcasting is portable. I take it with me, just take
mhm,
my microphone, and I can record wherever I am.
right.
So, but I interview lots of people in hospice, so I feel like I have a finger on what's happening there in a way, because I have so many contacts now with people doing hospice, and I do speak for hospices a lot now.
So when you're invited to speak, what are some of the key points that you want to make sure that you emphasize?
Well, if I'm speaking to a hospice staff, I always want to talk to them about self-care, how they care for themselves, and also how they could be learning some of the things for themselves, like utilizing what they're learning with their patients and caring for patients, allowing that to just change their lives and bring death into their own lives in a sense, and what they can learn from that in how they live, because that will actually sustain them and keep them from burning out so quickly
Hmm.
if they're utilizing their work as something that enriches them in every way in their lives. So that's one thing I talk about a lot. If I talk to lay audiences, oftentimes the same thing. I'm just talking about things I learned from people who were dying, to try to allay some of the fears people have around death, because there are many and that's pervasive in our society. So to try to talk about death in a more positive way, and the beautiful aspects of death, as we're talking death that is more gradual and that's anticipated. And you are telling me you deal much more with sudden death, which is traumatic and shocking.
Mhm.
And it's harder to say that's beautiful, I guess, and to help people see it as beautiful, perhaps. But
Well, you didn't exactly say that, but you spoke in retrospect about your father's suicide as something of a blessing or something that steered your life in a direction that's been very fruitful.
yeah, yeah, very true. Very true, because that possibility of growth after trauma is always there, and it's powerful when it happens, when you can utilize those experiences
Mhm.
to learn and grow.
In the hospice work that you were doing, was it usually residential hospices?
Yes, in patients in their own homes
Oh,
and
in their
going
home.
home
Okay.
visits. Yeah, sorry. I hearing residential and thinking of in their own residences, but
Oh, yeah. Well, when I first learned about the hospice movement at all, it was in healthcare settings. And then sometimes it would be a wing of a nursing home that was the hospice wing or something like that. But then isn't that the way that it happened most places, that hospices sort of started that way and then began doing more in-home hospice care?
well, in the very beginning here in the US, hospice was more, it was actually caring for AIDS patients in the very beginning
Hmm.
who didn't have a place to go. So there were like nonprofit little hospice homes that cropped up, but very quickly it became apparent that this work could be done in the patient's homes, and if they had someone to help care for them at home, they could make visits and visit them at home,
Yes.
which now is the majority of hospice deaths are in the home.
How can we be helpful in this podcast to this audience? You're the first person I've had on as a guest with that was explicitly around hospice work. What are some tips or best practices or advice that you would give to someone when they realize that now I'm in that circumstance, that my loved one, their death is foreseeable now? What are some best practices that you would recommend?
I think one of the first things is to show up for that person and have the courage to be there for them and visit them and be at the bedside with them, offer care if you can, because it's such a powerful experience, but you need to be there with them, witnessing it and be present for them. And I think also to realize like the dying process has its own timeline in a way, and so you have to go and be patient and just witness it and observe it. But one thing I wanted to say that you may relate to is that oftentimes there are experiences that happen, super normal or out of the
Mhm.
ordinary experiences at the end of life, that can be really powerful too. So I like it when people are aware of that. They may witness that their loved one is seeing someone coming to
Yes,
visit them that no one else can see, and
right.
departed loved ones, they may talk about things they're witnessing and seeing, and that can be very powerful but very inspiring for everyone else if they see it happen and they don't feel frightened by it, but they see it as, this is a beautiful gift that my loved one is receiving.
Right. In the literature now, that's called a pre-death visitation. It
Mhm.
happens enough that it's sometimes comforting for people to know, oh, that experience you're talking about, did you know that there's a category for that?
Yeah, yeah, and there are actually studies that have been done on it, and that's something I like to reassure people about, because sometimes they've had a fear that, is my loved one hallucinating?
Right.
Do they have a psychiatric problem? Do they need medication? That no, this is a normal experience, and it can actually be very comforting.
It can. And if people are open to the possibility, or if there are people who already their worldview is that it includes life after death, it can help feel a little less isolated, sitting by the bedside knowing that grandma's here, or of the family. There's a circle of family loved ones that are also aware that this person is going to transition and that you're part of a team.
Yeah, and I think it helps with grief as well, because it helps you perceive that your loved one has moved from this physical existence into a different place, but they're not alone. It's not scary because patients who have these experiences usually report how beautiful it is. There's light, there's love. And to remember that and imagine your loved one being in a place where they're surrounded by love and they're cared for, I think that can help us with the grieving process too.
Hmm. Um, have you dealt a lot with family members, extended family members, and uh, drama that can happen around the anticipated dying of a loved one?
Yes, yes, particularly when we care for patients in the home and family members have traveled there to help take care of their loved one or be there. And oftentimes, if there were any old conflicts that didn't get resolved in the past, those will come up
Yeah.
around a death because everyone's under stress. And oftentimes, people just have different worldviews and they see it differently, or they want different things for their loved one, and they can't come together and agree on how this should all take place.
Hmm. Have you found yourself mediating that kind of thing and being effective at helping people come
Yeah,
together for the good of the?
it's one thing that hospice can be really helpful for is just sitting down and having a family conference and reminding everyone, once again, as I said before, like this dying process, it's about your loved one who's dying, and it has its own timing and it will play out in its own way. And we each have to love and respect the dying person, and however they wish for things to be, we honor them by allowing it. And so if the dying person doesn't want very much pain medication, they have a right to make that choice. If they would like to be more medicated, they have a right to make that choice. Like, it's important for us to listen to their wishes rather than the family members' preferences or how they think it should be.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways we mediate, is encouraging them to just listen to their loved one.
Yes. Over my career, been the person who receives a phone call asking for a funeral. And very often that's because the person has already died. Once in a while, people will phone ahead and say, Mama's dying in the next few days, and we want to get the ball rolling on services. But many times it's afterwards, and there are people I didn't even know. But then you get involved in kind of cross currents of arguing over just about everything. The bullet, who's going to eulogize, and what kind of headstone, or all kind of things. And sometimes I'm in that circumstance of trying to say, well, we still have a job to do, and it's to give a good public send off to your loved one, and let's just focus on that and leave the
Yeah,
rest of this.
trying to find common ground if there is any. Sometimes, I mean, that's how what we try to do, but sometimes that's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
In my own case, my mom died, it's been 10 years ago now, but she fully planned her own funeral, and she had left a notebook for us with, she paid for everything, and then she planned the whole service. She had all the speakers listed.
Hmm.
Um, she picked out her headstone. She designed the little pamphlets that would be given out to people. She did everything
Oh,
herself. And it was amazing because for my brother and I, it was so easy to just follow her plan. And
amen.
we didn't have to go through any arguments. We just carried out what she had wanted. And that was a real blessing.
I was just serving in a church. I kind of float around the city of Tucson, and help out at different places. But one that I particularly love just had a series like that during, Catholic people pay a lot of attention to death and afterlife rising during the Lent and Easter cycle that we're still in. We're still celebrating Easter. And this church had someone come in and did I think like a 6-week process of guiding people through documents. Here's how to do all these different things, and one of them was planning your service and having all of
That
that
is
organized.
that's so wonderful. It's
Yeah.
such a gift, and even for my brother and I, we're so different. We probably would have clashed on what to do or making these decisions, but to know we could come together and read her notebook together, and it was so sweet because
Mhm.
she had chosen speakers, and then some people's names she had to cross off because they had already died before
Yes.
she died, and she wrote a new person's name in, and it was really precious to see that, and it is a beautiful gift.
Sometimes they have to make room for people they only met in the last couple of months of their life too, because sometimes there'll be hospice personnel that were strangers until they became this hugely important figure, like right at the end. Yeah.
That is so very true, very true.
I wanted to tell you a story. My younger sister, I'm one of five kids, but my parents had the bonus baby when they were 42, and she's now my editor. She does my books, and she just has a charisma, a special gift in her circle of friends for being the person that people go to when there's a diagnosis. You know, she's worked in scuba diving and yachting, where a lot of people don't have a congregational life. They're all over the world and they just don't have the kind of life where they go to a temple or a mosque or a church. But they know that she does that thing, which is praying. she has
Wow.
she has a prayer life, and they trust that whatever it is she does is effective, and they often ask for her help near the end. We came upon a process. Did you know that when a new saint is made in the Catholic Church, there has to be a day to celebrate them on the calendar, like March 17th being St. Patrick's Day. So
Yeah.
when a new saint comes on board, the church has to decide what day are we going to celebrate them, and the church's default setting is the anniversary of their death.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it might not always work. If somebody died on Christmas, that day's already taken. But they'll the
Yeah.
the they'll try to make that the default. And the idea is that it's their birthday into eternal life.
Hmm.
And so she and I do this little thing that we call planning your afterlife birthday party.
Oh, I love that.
While you're sitting there in the bed, can you think if it really works that way, and you get to have any say about who you see and whatnot, and if there are people that are really excited that you're coming and looking forward to the day of your passing or soon after it, what kind of party would you like? Would you like an intimate thing with a few? Would you like a come one, come all? What kind of food or drink or music or whatever? And we get people actively engaged in that process, and it can be really fun.
I love it because I like the idea that it turns it into kind of a joyful reunion in a way and and a celebration for us instead of something that's fearful or frightening.
And people might go back and forth, in the same day or within a period of hours. You might have, a moment where you're just up and hopeful and enthusiastic, and then fears creep in, and there's that natural up and down. But we did that with our own mother, who died in 2012, and she was 91, and she knew that she was dying. And Catherine said to her, "Isn't it time for us to plan your party?" And she said, "Party? I didn't know I was having a party." And she said, "Well, your afterlife party, your birthday party after you pass." She said, "I didn't know I was going to have one." And she said, "Well, of course you will. There's going to be a big celebration. Lots of people. You've been 91 years. There are people that want to see you. Uh, who would you like to invite?" And she was married 52 years to my dad, and then was 14 years widowed. But the first person she came up with at the top of the list was someone none of us had heard of.
Hmm.
She said, "I had my first friend when I was in the second grade, and
Oh,
she was the first person that I knew loved me that wasn't in my family." And then she suddenly moved away, and I never saw her again. And
that's so sweet. Person all of those years and carried her with her. Wow.
never spoke her name, and I don't even remember the name, but that I remember the story. And she said, "She's old as I am, so she's probably dead. She'd probably be available to come to my afterlife
She's
party."
probably she probably has her calendar open on that day.
Something like that. And so she was at the top of the list, and Catherine said, "Okay, well, we got that one. Who's next?" "Well, your father." So my dad did make it, at number 2 on the top 10 or whatever it was. So he got invited, and she invited some others. And Catherine said, "Well, aren't you forgetting someone?" And she said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, what about Mother Mary?" My mother was a devout Catholic who had Marian statues around and prayed the rosary a lot, and had a sweet love for the Mother of Jesus. She said, "Oh my, would she come?" She's a celebrity. Would she show up at my little party? And Catherine said, "Of course she would. She knows that you love her, and why wouldn't she?" And then it opened a category for her, and she said, "Well, if I invite her, I've got to invite Joseph.
She won't
I
want
wouldn't invite
to
you and not your
go.
husband to a party."
Exactly.
And then from there, she populated the rest of it. But it's a simple thing to do with people, and I don't think it's a trick. I really do believe that we get what we want, and and it doesn't hurt to ask.
I love that it leads to a lot of stories too, just like you heard about someone you'd never heard about before. It's a
It would
great
have
way.
never happened if I hadn't asked the question.
Yeah, it's a great way to invite those stories and in a kind of a joyful way. Like,
And it could have the secondary effect of helping those family members that have to plan the funeral. Oh, well, if what she's really looking forward to is X, well, maybe there's a way to factor some of that into the way that we do the service or the food and drink or the
yeah, yeah,
of it. Yeah.
yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, it's one that has stayed with me.
I'm sure that you probably talk about this all the time, but just the importance of like facing up to whatever fears we have about death, because it's normal and natural for everyone to have fears, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're exacerbated by experiences we've had in life. When if someone died when we were younger, or we saw an accident happen or something,
Hmm.
that the more we can just work with that fear when we're younger and get more comfortable with the reality that we're all mortal and we will all, this physical body will die, I feel like we can live a much fuller and richer life if we're not locking part of ourselves away in fear and separating it off so we never have to think about it.
Yes.
So I think all of us need to maybe do a little work on ourselves and looking at what fears do I have and what fears do I still carry with me, and why.
In all of your experience in hospice work, what are like the top three? What are the ones that you keep hearing recur again and again that people are afraid of as they approach their death?
Most people would say they're afraid of the dying process more than they're afraid of being dead. It isn't being
Hmm.
dead they fear, though some people do, because some people imagine being dead as being in blackness, nothingness, and that feels frightening. But most people talk about a fear of being in pain, that they'll be in pain when they die. And I think some people may have old guilt that they're living with or regrets, and they worry that somehow they'll be punished in the dying
Yes.
process, and they'll suffer more in the dying process because of something that happened in the past, which I would love to take that idea away from people as well.
You
That
mean that they kind of deserve a painful death because they did
yeah,
something
yeah,
bad?
that dying isn't, it's not a punishment. It's a normal part of the natural cycle of life. We all die. And that there can be, we have the capability of helping people as they're dying, when it's expected and when it's a gradual process, to help them with whatever symptoms they have,
Hmm.
so they don't have to have an inordinate amount of fear about that. But to also recognize, like, death itself is a mystery, because we haven't necessarily died, though some of us have probably had near death experiences where we've gotten a taste of that.
Yes.
That the fact that it's a mystery doesn't mean that it's a bad, negative, or frightening mystery. It just means that it's like it's a little unknown to us, and it may turn out to be a wonderful surprise.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
Uh-huh. How has all of this affected your own ideas around your death or the way that you're living?
I find myself like focusing much more on being in the present moment, trying to enjoy every moment, and aware all the time that life is fleeting and precious. And so I have to make the most of whatever experience I'm in. So it's really helped me look differently on things that before I might have been upset about, like, oh, why did this happen? Like, I just went through a bout with shingles
Oh,
in the past, which is, a
yes.
painful process. But for me, I choose to view it as, oh, this is interesting. I've never had this before. Like, this is what my life is giving me right now. How interesting. I'm going to experience it and learn from it and see what this is like. So rather than getting upset about it, and about something that I can't change anyway. It's not getting upset about what is. This is just how life is right now for me. So I'm going to look at it with curiosity and accept whatever that is, and,
Mm.
and go through it the best way I can. So that's kind of how I'm living, trying to live moment to moment. But I also mentioned the idea of forgiveness, because for me, I found lots and lots of resentments from the past that I have clung to for a long time, that it's really not worth the energy and the time to hold on to those old things. So I work a lot on trying to let that go
Do
and
you
just.
have some meditative or spiritual practices that help you do that, that you share in your books or in your talks?
Yes, yes, I do. I use a journal, and so I write about things a lot, and I sometimes will write dialogues with, if it's with a person that I'm trying to forgive, I try to write from their perspective. If we had a negative encounter, like, what was that person feeling and what were they thinking, and how did they see the situation we were in? Because that gives me then compassion for
Mm.
them and where they're coming from, and almost instantly that kind of takes away some of my blame or negativity, because I understand they see the world in their own way and I see it in my way. And that is what our conflict may have been about. And that it's okay to still love them and not blame them for whatever has happened between us, and not blame myself either.
Uh, are you familiar with the genre of life review stories that near-death experiencers speak about?
Yes, yes.
It's
Yeah,
what you're describing reminds me of a life review,
yes, I
seeing things
love
from the
that.
point of view of the other.
I love that idea, and for me, I guess, like, I feel like I can do that now. I
Yes,
can start that,
exactly. Yeah.
because if I don't, I may run out of time at the very end and not have time to do all this, so I can go back and look at things now. And my father's suicide death has just been one of the biggest things for me in my life, to look at and review and try to process what was happening for him,
Hmm.
what made him make that choice, and dealing with, I had anger toward him for a while that I had to get over. I had to
Yeah.
find compassion and forgiveness for him, and had to get resolve my own guilt about why couldn't I save him.
Mm.
And so that's been a lifelong practice right there, working just on my dad's death alone.
Yes. In case people in the audience don't know about the life review as it's experienced in the IANS community, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, of which I'm a member, a lot of people that have an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, have some moment where they describe being surrounded by or even floating in love. And then into the scene, they're brought into a moment from their life, and it could have been in high school, it could have been any time, but there's a moment where it's almost like the tape is run back. They're allowed to see a moment in their life and the thing that they said or did that was important that they notice now, and see it from another point of view. Sometimes it's negative. We can be, especially in our teens or our young life, we can think our criticisms to each other are very witty and clever, and someone laughs along at the joke that was at their expense because they didn't see another option, but they were very wounded. And so sometimes people will be brought into a scene like that, and it's not that they have their nose rubbed in it; they just experience it from the point of view of other people in the scene.
That's so powerful.
It is.
That reminds me, a number of years ago, I had a dream that was like a life review, when I was taken into this room where it was a circular room, and there was like a mural on all the walls around me. But the mural was composed of little videos that were all playing simultaneously as I got closer. And they were all connected together like puzzle pieces. And each little
Mhm.
video was a moment from my life, some kind of memory from something that happened, even the tiniest little things, to my dad's death, big and small, all these moments all connected in my life. And I had the insight in the dream that all of these things belong. They're all part of my life, and
Yes.
they all fit together, and that this wouldn't have happened without that happening, and they're all connected. And I turned to this man who had taken me into the room, and I said, I can see it now. It's all been perfect. It's all been perfect, the way it's all fit together. And I said, if only I had known that at the time, I wouldn't have worried so much. He turned to me and he said, no, no, even the worry was perfect. And so that helped me a lot with self-forgiveness, because it made me realize, as we go through these life experiences, we just are who we are. We're young, maybe we don't have the wisdom we have now. We couldn't see things that we can see now. And so maybe we did hurt someone or cause harm, but it's important that we forgive ourselves for all of those moments.
And even when we're older, we might have new experiences for which we really don't have much of a frame of reference. I got all the way to this age, and now, boom, this, and I don't know what to do. Um, I like you try to stay in the present moment, ask for the present help, you know, uh, in Christian language, give us today our daily bread. We don't ask for a bakery, we just ask for a bite.
Yeah, no, which is that's such a perfect prayer for the present moment in a way too, like you said, because
Mhm.
it's the daily bread. What do I need for this moment to get to navigate this and to handle this?
And you probably have seen that that prayer for people that have prayed it for a lifetime is very hardwired into the minds of people dying in dementia or who appear to be beyond communicating. You can start saying that prayer next to the bed, and you can watch this almost dead person, you know, join in,
Mouthing the words,
mouthing the
something.
words. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've even had some patients actually speak even though they haven't been verbal for a few years, but because of that memory, like you said, it is so hardwired, it returns and they can speak about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, what a great life you have. What have you not done that you want to do?
Well, I'd like to travel more. I'm excited to travel more, and I'm just now. We just had our first grandchild
Mhm.
9 months ago, and so I've been waiting a long time for that. So
Mhm.
I am doing it and
Is
getting to
that when nearby where you get to see them on a daily
where I am now.
basis?
We have a condo here, so we come here to see the grandbaby, and
Mhm.
back and forth between here and Colorado.
Uh-huh. Good for you. Do you have other books in the pipeline, or you feel like you've said what you have to say?
Yes, I have a book that I'm trying to write, but a story that took place in Italy, and it was after my dad died, a number of years after he died, but when I was still really grappling with guilt over his death, and then I had a patient of mine die in my clinic, in my family practice clinic that I was still running,
Mhm.
um, and all of this guilt and blame came up again, that my patient died and I couldn't save him and I couldn't save my dad. And that all happened while we were on a traveling through Italy. And so I'm writing about that and this experience. And when I was in Italy, I'm not Catholic, but we visited this little chapel, and I was grappling with the grief of the boy's family, the boy who had died, and feeling all this pain for them. And I wrote a note. There was a friar sitting there with a table asking for prayer requests. So I wrote on a prayer request, please pray for this boy's family and their pain, and also for me and my pain. And I folded it up and put it in the basket. And I looked up, and the friar just nodded his head to me
Mhm.
as if he didn't know what I wrote, but it was as he was saying, it's already done. Whatever you asked for, it's already done. I just knew it. What happened to me is that the word novena came into my head, and I didn't know what it was because,
Oh,
as I said, I'm not Catholic. I didn't know what a novena was. So I looked it up and saw what it was, and I realized, oh, my trip through Italy is to be a novena, and every day will be dedicated, each day for 9 days, I will attend to this grief, and I'll ask for prayers and ask for um, comfort and peace for this family. So that's what this book will be about, the novena
good for
through.
you. Yeah, I'm a lot of my audience might recognize that, although my audience is changing all the time, so I don't exactly know who I'm talking to. But in a Catholic tradition, a novena is an intention that you pray for 9 days in a row. It's just a way of saying to the universe, I really, really mean it. This isn't just a passing thought. I'm returning to this thought 9 days in a row. And then there are different prayers and forms that it can take, but the main intention is I really, really mean it. And I'm trying to focus on this intention. And it's very often for a loved one.
Yeah, it's interesting that that thought came to me as a non-Catholic, but I did it. I did the novena because I thought, well, how beautiful is that? How lovely, as a way to dedicate my travels in a way.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I'm this Catholic priest, and I'm legit. I'm 38 years ordained almost, and I was baptized at 3 weeks old, and all that. I like the fact that in late in life for me, most of the people I interact with through my website and stuff are not Catholic. They're just people that are interested in the things I'm interested in. You must know, do you ever do yoga or know somebody that does?
yeah.
Do you want to be a Hindu?
No, no, but
Most
yes, but I
don't.
do it. I do yoga all the time. So
But
yeah,
it's a beneficial practice that comes from one of the world's great religious traditions, and you can borrow it. You don't have to convert in order to benefit. So one of the things I get to do is to say to people, well, there's this or that Roman Catholic practice that you might not have known about, and I could show you. I could teach you how to do that. You don't have to become one of us in order to learn how to. You were talking about forgiveness earlier, and for me, one of the most important things Jesus is recorded as ever having said is with one of his dying breaths, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And nobody apologized. He didn't wait to be apologized to. You can forgive unilaterally.
exactly. And not knowing what we're doing, that's the basic human condition.
Isn't it?
We're here. We don't really know what it is we're doing. We're just trying to get through each day.
Well, I just say to him sometimes, you seem to have a lot of that. Give me some of it. You have a lot of capacity to forgive. And I bump into the border, I bump into the edge of my forgiveness. And I keep having to forgive the same thing again and again. Would you please help me over the finish line, get this out the door? I use breathing a lot for that. Breathing in, it fills the body with nutrition, and breathing out detoxes it. I just do focused breathing on breathing out the negativity that's in me. And it's got to be somewhere. There's only so much space in your body.
I think it's so perfect too because we all breathe. We don't need special tools or classes or anything. We all breathe. We can just use our own breath, and it's so powerful.
Sometimes I recommend to people go sit next to a green plant, because that plant is going to give you what you need and you're going to give it what it needs.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
throws off oxygen and we throw off carbon dioxide, and we can just be two little buddies. We can just
yeah,
sit next to a plant and help each other out.
yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it's been good being with you. Do you have last words for us, or any kind of parting comments?
Well, I guess what I try to encourage people is to just love the life they have, whatever it is, whatever life has given you. Just try to bring as much love as you can into each moment. And then also just be prepared because life has its ups and downs and anything can happen and we don't know. So if you're being the best person you can be and loving as much as you can love in every moment, you'll be ready for whatever life happens to bring you.
Exactly right. Sometimes I pray in advance just in case I have a deathbed, in case I don't go quickly, and I do have to have the nursing home and the hospice and all that stuff. I pray that I could embody love. And that
Mm,
when I was a really young seminarian, I used to have to do nursing home visitation to strangers. I wore the priest outfit, so I looked legit. I walked in, and sometimes I would just encounter someone who was, had all kind of health problems, who would just light up the room and say, "Oh, thank you for coming, and tell me about you," and whatnot. And then you could go to the next room with somebody that wasn't nearly as ill, but who was crabby and unpleasant. And you know you don't need, it's not really a judgment, it's just an observation. And I just thought I'd like to be the kind that, regardless of how much pain I was in, or how, you know my circumstance, that I prayed in advance for that. I was taught to pray for a rainy day. Both of my aunts were first grade teachers. They were both Dominicans in the same order that I belong to. And one of them said, little people have little problems and big people have big problems. So while you're little, pray for the problems you'll have when you're big.
mm.
Ask God to help you on the day that you have a big problem. And you can remind God that you prayed when you were little. Tell him to hold up his end of the bargain.
I like that idea because we do need to be prepared. Like life is just full of all kinds of things. And so that in the moment we don't feel blindsided or cheated or something when things happen, but that because that's just what life is. But all of it's a chance to learn things and show more love and
Yeah,
grow.
there'll always be somebody to love, even if it's somebody that's there to empty your bedpan. There'll be somebody in your field of experience that you can love. So, how can people be in touch with you if they would like to be?
The website they can go to get the most information is it's eoluniversity.com, which stands for End of Life University. And that's the name of my podcast, which is on all the podcast platforms.
Hmm.
And they can find out about that and my books at that website, eoluniversity.com.
Hmm. Well, you're delightful to talk with. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you get a number of people from this audience that want to seek you out and learn about what you have available in print and all the ways in which you've offered what you have to the world. So thank you for the life you're living.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being the joyful friar. I really.
Actually, the founder of our order, Saint Dominic, that's his nickname.
Oh,
But it's the reason I joined. There's a lot of religious orders, and a lot of them had pain and suffering in their name. And I just thought, even as a young man, life's hard enough. I don't think I want to join an order that's all about crowns of thorns or something like that. I'd like to go with the joyful guy. So, and I asked his permission, and actually he told me in prayer, I never called myself that. Other people call me that. Go ahead if you want to. Anyway,
I like it. I like that idea.
yeah. Well,
That's,
anyway,
that's
I
what I'm
hope the rest
saying.
of your day is great, and I'm
You
grateful
too.
that you share this time with our audience.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay. Well, this has been this episode of The Joyful Friar. Thank you for being with us. If you'd like to be in touch with me, that can easily be done through my website, nathan-castle.com. But for now, God bless you and have a great day. Bye now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can make a donation by clicking the donate button. See you next time. God bless.